Prehistoric? Des Moines? That's right. Now, you may think Des Moines as a mid-sized city in the Midwest, and you'd be right. But the settlements that were in the area of the Des Moines and Raccoon Rivers, where they meet right there, where Des Moines is now, go back 7,000 years. That's right, prehistoric tribes. Evidence has been found in excavations that prehistoric tribes or communities were in the area. And it's funny because even then they had a state fair. 7,000 years ago, they had a state fair. Now, of course, they called it something else, but it had cotton candy, it had roller coasters, it even had an annual appearance of the rock band Kansas at the state fairs back then. Now, because it was a different time and they didn't have the, for example, electronic amplification that we have now, the band Kansas would have to sing completely a cappella. So they'd sing Carry On Wayward Son without really any, well, like I said, without any speakers. Now, they did have some instruments and they were able to bang on rocks to keep time for the music, but they still were a popular band with multiple top 10 hits, just as they are and were today in the last few decades. So it's a tradition that has been, in other words, the personality of the community was set very long time ago. And they're still finding artifacts today from those days. In fact, they found a ring by Larry King, who was alive back then. They found a hat worn by Ronald Reagan. They found nails that Jimmy Carter used to build the original houses that he works on in the area. And so this goes back. I mean, you're talking about older Americans that have been around that remember those days and remember how simple life in Des Moines was before it got so competitive. So now today, there isn't a youngster in the Iowa area that they cannot think of their teenage years without anxiety because they were either A, trying to create a state-winning heifer, a state-winning apple pie, or a state-winning rabbit. That's right, rabbits are big at the Iowa State Fair. And so these kids spend their entire existence at the ages of 12, 13, 14, 15, before they really start, getting interested in the opposite sex, right? Raising cattle, raising rabbits. And some kids raise the rabbits on top of the cattle so that they can enter two species, two animals in one competition. And so because of that, the anxiety it produces, the super competitiveness of the Iowa State Fair today, you didn't have back in the old days. And so a lot of old timers reminisce about the early days when people would just bake apple pies because everybody loved a dang pie. Give me a dang apple pie. People would go to the state fair and they'd walk around going, give me a dang apple pie, Mabel. Give me some of that pie that we love so much. Now, these are pies that Mabel might have put on their porch to cool in the old days, right? They didn't have TV, guys. Think of it this way. So they would walk around the neighborhood, and that's why those old homes have those big porches, because people sat on those porches to greet the neighbors walking by. And sometimes the ladies, predominantly ladies making the pies, would put them on that porch to cool. And so people would come by and say, Mabel, what is that I'm smelling? That is the sweetest smelling apple pie I've ever... And they're like, hey, Festus, do you want some of my pie? Well, you're just going to have to wait till the state fair. And they'd laugh. You're just going to have to wait till the state fair. But now it's so competitive because it's just natural over time. Mabel makes her pie and wins a blue ribbon. And, old Celine, she's over here going, well, I'm going to win next year. And over the years, over the millennia, we're talking thousands of years, guys, that competition gets more and more heated. So the good thing is that when you look at Des Moines, you don't realize today how old the city is. Now, sometimes when you look around the political scene, when you look around the people running for office in Des Moines, some of them are pretty old. I mean, you got 110-year-old guys and girls running for office in Des Moines. So, in that case, a community can benefit from younger blood coming up, and eventually they do. But there is a tendency sometimes for people to hold on for 120, 130 years in office, even though if the public likes them and keeps voting for them again. It's like, come on. At a certain point, it's time to step out the door and give somebody else a shot. But that's because these community is so old. Now, a lot of the younger communities in the United States don't have any knowledge of what it's like to have a community that's 7,000 years old like Des Moines. And there's a lot of benefits to that. For example, the Des Moines and Raccoon Rivers come together where they have for millennia. And in the early days, they had all kinds of amusements down there that they don't have today. But the knowledge, for example, there was a log ride that you could take from the very beginning of the Des Moines River and ride a log going pretty fast all the way through Des Moines. Now you had to make a choice. Do we stay on the Des Moines? So you're in a cutout log, right? You're going really fast. You've got a paddle, but not much else. You might be wearing an elk skin, an elk fur, right? As your clothes, maybe buffalo, because we're talking thousands of years ago, guys. You're going down the Des Moines River as fast as possible, and you have to make a choice at that juncture. Do I stay on the Des Moines River, or can I cut over to the Raccoon River? Now, the thing is, if you make the wrong choice, you're not going to be happy because water is going to fill your canoe and you're going to sink to the bottom, at which point then you got to swim to the top, get out, and as tradition dictates, you have to walk to the nearest hotel, go up to the bellman, go up to the guy behind the desk, the girl behind the desk, and say, I took the wrong turn at Raccoon River. And at that point, just like in the old days where Chi-Chis used to sing happy birthday, then in this case, all of the hotel staff would go, I made the wrong turn at Raccoon River. And they start singing, and they're doing this kind of thing. And you have to stand there in shame because you messed up. So now, today, they don't have quite so much pressure on the people on the river, but it's still a very decisive thing because if you make the wrong mistake today, you're not going to go down to the bottom. But you may end up in, I don't know, Davenport. You may end up in, like, Mobile, Alabama. And you're like, how did I get here? So you got to be careful, guys. And it tells you really the deep history of the city and how much of the old ways are still permeated through the way things are done today. So, guys, that's a look at the very old prehistoric days of Des Moines and how the artifacts that they're still finding around the city today are impacting life in the community. Come on back for more.